Welcome to the Sixcast, a podcast where we discuss real-world strategies, tips, and stories that provide helpful insights for your digital transformation experience.
Hello everyone, Happy New Year, all the best for 2022. Welcome to another episode of Sixcast, the hustle and thrive in the six and beyond. Today, again, we have another very special guest joining us all the way from Singapore, Dom Braun, the CEO of Lykke Business, a Swiss-based Fintech company. Dom, warm welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Nice to see you again. It has been a while. And, my absolute pleasure to meet you both.
Thank you, Dom. Just to give everyone an introduction about Lykke Business, it's a fintech company based out of Switzerland, if I found right. And they have, it's one of the earlier pioneers in the space and blockchain lab with a suite of unique products and services. Prior to joining Lykke Business, Dom, he was the managing director APAC for episode 6, and he was the first person in the ground since 2019, if I understand right. And he believes that E6 will be a unique and a special unicorn in the fintech by 2025. I'd like to hear more about that as well as we go along. Again, we can talk all about that. But before anything, I wanted to let everyone know how Dom and I met. We met at Warwick, where I was doing my MBA exchange at Warwick Business School in Coventry, UK. A beautiful little town in the center part of the UK, where we became friends, kept talking, and here we are today, and in different parts of the world, connecting again to talk business. So to start off, Dom, tell me a bit about yourself. How have you been, and what's your life goals? What do you want to do? What's the impact that you want to make, and what do you want to achieve in life?
Well, the multi-million-dollar question, right? What you want to achieve in life. And I mean, if you look what I've done so far over the last, I would say 25 or 23 years since I'm actually in my job life, right? I started like in financial services in the 90s, in the brokerage world and asset management world, always focusing on like sales and trading in that space. At some stage I moved into technology, which is quite exciting in general. And I just want to, whatever I do, I want to have, first of all, fun, right? It has to make fun what I'm doing. It has to provide or fulfill my passion, what I'm doing. And you also want to have an impact somehow with whatever you are doing, right? So especially now on the technology side, there are so many changes, so many innovations happening. And for me, it's quite exciting because you can be part of something maybe even big in the future if you're in an area which is still kind of, I would say, underexplored, like the blockchain space. It's still in an infant space. And, even though blockchain is there for a long, long time, but the potential is, I think, massive. And I'm not speaking just about cryptocurrency, but the underlying technology itself, blockchain. Yeah. So I want to do an impact, and I also want to, while I'm always, I think, working quite hard and disciplines, but I want to have also good quality of life because with my family, I have 3 small kids, so it's very time incentive as well, or intensive.
Right. So your life from you started in Germany, and I don't know where else you actually ventured into. Now you have been living in Singapore. What are the other areas that you have explored in the part of the world? I love to travel, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what your experience have been.
Yeah. I moved out of Germany. I come originally, as you mentioned, from Germany, maybe 18 years or so ago. And I lived, before I really moved out of Germany, I already in the 90s, so end of 90s, I had an excursion in New York. At that time, Wall Street was still a big name, right? And different, in the trading space, etc. And but I just stayed there for a couple of months and went back to Germany. But since I'm now outside of Germany for 18 years. I've been now in the 11th year here in Singapore. I spent around 6 years in London before. And before Singapore directly, I was, I think, 1.5 years in Switzerland. So, and I also, when I was in London and I became self-employed during a short period of time, or during 2 years, I took the luxury to decide, okay, you know what, London is too much for me. And I moved to Mallorca, to Spain, right? And have my office from there and working from home from there, etc. But it's a long time ago, right? So yeah, I think I came around a bit, you know. Some people, they are even, more coming around, but I think for me it's fine. And again, you know, since now 11 years in Singapore, and at some stage, most likely we'll move also back to Europe, you know. If it's Germany, I'm not sure, but the world is big, right, in general.
Well, it's big, yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about Warwick. It was a show experience for me. A few months, did about 3 courses, and I made lots of friends. It's all about making lots of friends, and everyone wants to finish your classes for the day and go hit the bar, right? That's what everyone does. At Coventry, there's not a lot of things, anything else happening. So just within the university, how's your life at Warwick, and what do you learn? It's probably the network that I did as well yourself. Tell me.
Yeah, I think for me it was a great experience. I have to say, and I have to admit, it was my first time actually at university that time, because in the 90s when I actually decided when I finished school, etc., I decided not to study, but going more into more practice-orientated way, you know. So I did that time a lot of like exams, like the Series 7, Series 3, Series 30 in the US, and some trading exams in Switzerland and in Europe, etc. But I didn't study, so I always wanted to actually do my masters, right? And the interesting thing is in this time. Now, you know, also when I did the distance MBA in Warwick in 2016 for 3 years, is that with my managerial experience, my job experience, I was able to compensate that I didn't do a master's before, right? And I loved it, you know. I felt young, which. Yeah, I felt really young. I stayed actually on the campus as well. You know, it was a great experience. Met a lot of good people, and I think it also expanded your horizon, how you see things. And to be honest with you, I should have done it maybe 20 years earlier, or 10 years earlier, but it's never too late, I think. You know, and also. I think there might be much more to come, you know. I mean, I was speaking to Warwick also recently about potential DBA program in the future, you know, but it's also very time intensive, so we'll see. But in general, I loved it, you know, and I think it was a great experience, and I can just recommend to do the same, you know, if you haven't done your study work before, actually, you know, or at least an MBA, and because it helps you also in business at the end of the day.
Definitely. One of the more key things that I heard from you was that very interesting thing that you heard was it expands your horizon. I agree 100%. As well, the network that you make, it's very diverse. People from different parts of the world, Africa, South America, North America, Asia, Europe, like Australian area. There's lots of people coming into, like most of them with managerial experience, a lot of very interesting backgrounds where, you know, it is more than the learning. It's I think, in addition to the learning, I would say, the network that you build, and is in a very more of an enclosed space where you become good friends for a short period of time, and you keep that friendship for many years to come, and that's the best part.
Nobody can take it.
Kithmini, do you want to go next? Yeah,
nobody can take it from you, you know, the experience.
I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and I'm listening to you intensively and thinking about even my own son and how usually people get into a job or they go into academia, and sometimes either or, you come to a crossroads and you start your career late, or for other people, they become mature, experienced professionals in whatever industry they're in. So I think I was just drawing upon what you're saying, and I was coming to my own conclusions, and I was like, that is actually a really good sound advice for professionals who might not have that opportunity or the resources or the revenue and the income to be able to have some sort of compensation for their education to upgrade. But there's always opportunities in the future, so it gives hope. And it also provides like a really a good, clear understanding of how to be able to journey yourself from different countries and different professions, and then move into academia later when you're more stable, or even when you're in a retiree phase. Because I feel as though during this quarantine, it's given me an opportunity to feel how a retiree feels very early on. And I'm like, it's challenging. I'm like, to find things and actually to be completely alone, and then to have the motivation to pursue anything is very challenging for me, especially. So I appreciate what you're saying. But my question is specifically about about fintech, and like where do you think the future of fintech is? What is the best technology scope that you're invested in, and where do you see that in the next 10 years? How do you see your company evolving, or where do you see the future of fintech?
It's
a loaded question, but maybe you can answer. You can answer just a bit of it, of just education of an average person who doesn't really understand how this can complement their life or make things better. What do you think? What would be your suggestion for that, for them to introduce fintech into their personal or professional world?
Yeah, so maybe if I relate it also to the industry I'm in here, in the fintech space and blockchain space, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean necessarily that if you're in the fintech space, you're in the blockchain space. For example, the previous company I was with, what Waruna mentioned, Episode 6, right, was one of the, and you mentioned they most likely be a unicorn maybe in 2025. That's my personal prognosis, right? They are very thriving, fintech, very innovative, when I started there in 2019, I think there were like 30 people. I think today they're now like 80, 90 people, right? And it's still on a manageable scale, but fast growing, etc. And they didn't do anything really in the blockchain space, right? But they actually bridged with their next gen technology, blockchain, right? So the traditional technology we have, the legacy technology, they were focused on API driven cloud native technology, next gen technology. And then you have also blockchain as another layer of technology in general. And I think this will still evolve. First of all, I think you will see when you look at banks, for example, the big banks, not all, but in the US as well, especially, right? It's a lot of legacy there, right? Still. And it's very strange in North America, for example, or US, because on one hand, you have like Silicon Valley in the US, and with all these big tech companies. On the other hand, you see then the old tier one banks who are prepping along with legacy technology, right? And I think what you will see is a transformation further down the road over the next years and decades, that this will still adjust it, because I think technology driving the innovation and also driving the survival of those banks at the end of the day, right? And you see also now these days that fintechs getting regulated, offering their own financial products. They're on one hand competitors, on the other hand they're providing also technology to and partnering with banks. I think you see more collaboration in the future overall between also competitive companies, and I see it also with our company now in the blockchain space. Our founder has a vision, to make the financial world better, and you can always say that, but and how can you do it better? Yeah, first of all, with collaboration in general, right? If you can collaborate, you are actually stronger, and then you can also change also technology. If you use, for example, open source technology in a much more efficient and more sustainable way, right? But I mean, again, back to your question, open-ended, right? I mean, there's so many things happening, so many different trends you're seeing just on the blockchain space. And in blockchain, it's still, while I'm now in that space and the people I'm knowing, you think everybody knows about blockchain and cryptocurrencies, but actually it's still in the infant stage, you know, from that point of view. If that makes sense?
I think I have a complementary question to what Kithmini asked in your response. It's interesting to hear that you're saying it's still in the infancy stage. I thought that I'm a little late to invest on into crypto. We were talking as well. When the numbers go down, I had to make up for the losses or the late start that I had made. But you made some reference about the relative conservativeness when it comes to financial industry in North America. Like, why do you think Asia Pacific region is considered as the front runner in fintech, particularly China and India? China recently they made some changes. We don't want to talk about that as well. Particularly, South Asian region. Is it because of the number of unbanked people in those regions, or maybe because of the regulatory challenges? What's the reason why?
I think when I look, the question is specifically North America versus APAC. If you look just at the numbers, right? In APAC, how many people, it depends how you define APAC, but I think it's between 4.5 to 5 billion people, 4.7 or so at the moment in the Asia Pacific region, right? North America, around 600 million, if I'm not mistaken, right? So it's 8 times or so higher, yeah? So that means, or bigger, 8 times bigger. And that means you have a much more wider target audience. And as you mentioned, actually, unbanked or underbanked people. So you look at India, you look at China, you look at even Indonesia and Southeast Asia or Philippines, right? You have so many underbanked people and so many unbanked people as well, where you can actually be very innovative with solutions to target those target group and do your thing for financial inclusion. Financial inclusion has also been there for 30, 40 years, right? But I think the reason why you see here APAC as a front runner kind of in the fintech innovative space is because here is the most happening. Here's the most potential where you can also do something good. You can include people and give access to people to financial markets, for example. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons, and also interesting here in APAC. And then just if I look at Southeast Asia, the ASEAN region here, you have Singapore, you have Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, etc., Laos, Myanmar, etc. And it's a very fragmented market, right? With its own completely challenges and opportunities. And I think that's the opportunity also for tech companies, right? To move into that market and be very innovative and very target orientated on the requirements and the demand those guys in that region have. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Now, that also connects to my next concern and question that I wanted to ask you. I think you answered this question already, but I wanted to still ask it. What social problem does it solve? Or is it just because a whole bunch of smart people are going to make money? Now, what are the macro level economic, socio-economic impacts that fintech or blockchain particularly or crypto is going to make? Like, I read somewhere or heard somewhere that they're going to say that they're going to cut down, traditional banks are going to cut down 30 to 50% of their staff within the next few years because of automation, adoption of fintech. But as we all know, financial institutions, especially a country like Canada, which is probably one of the most strongest banking system, is they are a major part of the economic construct, social construct. Will that be hugely disruptive to the socio-economic sustainability will that just fill a gap in North America? North American people, I think most of them are, I haven't gone through the numbers, but the number of unbanked people, probably nearly zero, maybe a few percent, less than 10%. Who underbanked would be, I don't know what the parameters are. Either way, people are banked. People use banks, and people entirely depend on banks or financial institutions. Now, does it solve a problem? Is it really going to create a negative social impact?
I mean, there are different parts to your question. In general, I think in terms of like the example with Canada now, and I see it also in Singapore, everybody, I mean, there's no underbanked or unbanked person in Singapore, but we have also this very small population of 5.7 million people approximately. But everybody has 2 or 3 accounts, right, on average, so you can't say it's unbanked or underbanked as possibly in Canada. I think for this target audience, it's very important that actually as a financial institution or technology that you really, really use, for example, data analytics, right, to be able to offer your goods and services to the guys who actually have the gap, even if they are not underbanked or unbanked in general, right? But back to your earlier question, in general, what kind of social problems as well, like crypto or blockchain or fintech is solving? I think when you look at cryptocurrencies, right, with Bitcoin, the idea was here originally, or one of the ideas here was give access to everyone in the world to a global traded currency, right? And I think, in general, cryptocurrencies are just one of the use cases blockchain as a technology is providing. And when I look at blockchain as a whole, there are so many use cases where you can actually solve social problems, Social problems could be, as an example, corruption, right? If it comes to on government level to voting, for example, right? Because the ledger is immutable, you cannot manipulate any data, right? So you can actually use it to a benefit and for these use cases to make actually the world better and safer. And again, corruption is just one example for that, I would say, I think there was another question if cryptos is just making a whole bunch of people rich, right? I think, there are a lot of people became rich in cryptos, especially when they invested in the early days. I was unfortunately not one of them who invested in the early days, as you, Waruna, as you mentioned. And but it's never too late, I would say, right? But I think also it provided another asset class which is still not mainstream, right? Which is still as well in infancy, and unfortunately also a little bit negatively touched because it's not regulated, and a lot of fraud is happening still in that space, and a lot of hacking scandals, etc. So there's a lot to do in general. But does it solve blockchain in general, or crypto, the social inequality? I'm not sure about that, but the underlying technology, yes, because you can actually use the technology for the good at the end of the day, for good use cases.
Okay. Thanks. Kithmini, do you want to go next?
No, I was very interested in everything that you said. I have no follow-up question.
Now, the other question is, with the adoption of technology, with the adoption of maybe devices, there is a aging population, obviously, around the world. Pretty much now, predominantly, this part of the world, people are aging. I think the aging population is a lot bigger than maybe other countries. And obviously, differently able people around the world, people with low education, linguistic challenges, technological literacy.
Yeah.
Do you think will this be a challenge for them to adopt or start using, or reap the best benefit of blockchain and fintech?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there are two ways to look at it, right? First of all, because the innovation is happening so fast in the technology space. And I see it everybody's aging, right? I see it with myself, you really have to keep up, and what your kids actually using today is for you sometimes very strange, right? So you have to adapt to that. And I think the older you are becoming, the more difficult it is to adapt to the fast changing environment and the technology, I think it comes back to everyone themselves with making themselves educated about the technology, and what you can do with that. The second part of the question, how you can look at it, is yes, you can actually again use, for example, blockchain and technology in general to actually counter problems which elderly people have, right? To make, for example, the whole healthcare system more efficient for the patients and more cost efficient and process efficient, but also for insurance companies. Because when you just look also at the US and North America in general, as an example, as you're based in North America, the cost for healthcare in relation to the GDP is massive, right? And it's still kind of legacy, right? So a lot of innovation has to happen there to make, for example, also from a security perspective, medical records safer, and also how can you prevent diseases from happening, or how you can stop, for example, sickness of people, for example, happening is, to make medical records more transparent within an ecosystem, more accessible, and also that you can actually act on that and you can actually provide the best or the better treatment for the patients, So I think there are different ways to look at this question here in general, but yes, it will be a challenge for elderly people, but there's a lot of good, which can be provided for those kind of populations.
Mm-hmm. Something that I heard recently was the China banned crypto mining. Does it change anything for Singapore? What is it about? Again, don't want to be too particle about here, but then again, any particular moves impact social and technology.
Yeah, definitely. I think also different ways. A lot of mining companies, they're not necessarily went to Singapore, but they went to Thailand, for example, to other countries, right, to be operative there. But we see also due to the situation now with Hong Kong, because the ultimate result in the past was that a lot of Chinese companies maybe moved to Hong Kong, but this is also not more so happening unless you want to stay in that same kind of ecosystem, due to the influence of China in Hong Kong, etc. So you see in Singapore as well, a lot of investment coming from China, from Chinese company, from big companies, a lot of more jobs getting created here, and a lot of crypto exchanges, trying to move their operations even to Singapore now, because Singapore is, I would say, one of the most important hub in the fintech and the blockchain space, And interestingly as well, the guys who are running the blockchain association in Singapore are the same or similar, partly the same guys who built up the Singapore Fintech Association a couple of years back and made Singapore the fintech hub #1 in the world, right? And I think they will try to do the same on the blockchain side as well, But yeah, you see a lot of influx now from China due to this mining ban, and due to, in general, the whole difficult crypto situation in China. Yeah, mm-hmm. And Singapore definitely benefits from that.
Do you think the legislations around internationally, the governments are intentionally slowing down the adoption of fintech, or avoid any economic meltdowns, or pretty much the impact on their currency?
Yeah, I think what we also see in our company and in our ecosystem, because in our ecosystem we also have a small crypto exchange based in UK, right? And I see it in the way that legislation or regulation in that space is good, actually, and it has to happen, for sure. it sometimes slows down the innovation, but it makes things more sustainable, right? Because again, the comment I did earlier is that at the moment, cryptocurrencies, right, have a very bad reputation for a lot of people because it's volatile, a lot of fraud is happening, etc., and because it is unregulated, right, in most of the jurisdictions, And I think if also crypto exchanges would start voluntarily trying to get regulated, right, that would change everything, And for sure, and in this case, I mean, I'm coming also from a RegTech background, right? So before I moved into the real fintech space, I was like 6 years in the RegTech space, so a lot with solutions for regulatory compliance, risk management, etc. And all this stuff. And at the end of the day, I mean, nobody likes regulations, right? It always slows down innovation and processes. But in the long run, it has to be there, right? To make market more efficient and more fair at the end of the day. That's my take on that. Yeah.
So you're thinking that there should be some sort of a regulation, even to crypto space should be imposed at some point, as opposed to being like free flowing. Everyone does whatever they want to do. Yeah, it could.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we ourselves at the moment we're in the process in UK to get the FCA license, right, for the crypto exchange in general. And in UK, a lot of things happening, but you have to go that way. You have to go that route. Otherwise, I mean, I always compare it because I started in the 90s in the financial industry, and when I was one of my first jobs in a brokerage, there was no regulation in the 90s, right? So everybody was kind of doing what they want. Not that it's kind of the Wolf of Wall Street, right? that time, and it was a wild west, and some companies really, really took it to the maximum that time. And it stopped all with regulation coming in, making everything fairer. And also then a lot of companies survived because they adapted to the regulation. And I think it's even the similarities are there. You can't compare it completely. But I think the same will happen also in the crypto space or blockchain space as a whole, with more regulation coming in. It has to come in, because it's... it can't be like a Wild West mentality at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Dom, to follow up on what you're saying, I completely agree, because I think as we saw as innovation accelerated so quickly, and then nobody anticipated, it was very hard to anticipate and understand how the social issues, like some implications would happen for misinformation or the digital, as you're saying, like these things that are fraudulent that will inevitably happen in any industry, in any sector, in any profession. There is always a risk, and to hedge against that for technology, I think that's a new formulated plan. I really don't believe that before that there was so much emphasis, but we saw that in recent years that ethics was really important. And then bringing in policy was important. So I strongly agree with what you're saying of regulation and helping to protect people, and especially in the early stages. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, It has to be there.
Super important.
It's more sustainable. Yeah, absolutely. And then you see with like we are a Swiss-based company, right? Switzerland, is doing a good job in that. Singapore is doing a good job, right? So there are more and more jurisdictions coming, right, these days, who are actually bringing regulation to the market, but very consultative, right, with also the industry, which is also important, that you're not just implementing regulation on your own. And I think that's what's good with Singapore, because there are always these consultation papers with the Association of Banks of Singapore before regulation actually gets implemented, and I think it has to be in collaboration with the whole industry, in general. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, you answered this question to a very extent early in the conversation. This will impact big banks, I think you would agree, and traditional fiat currency. Any thoughts of central banks considering introducing digital currency? Will that be another version to the fiat currency, or will that really impact, or will that maybe complement crypto?
Yeah, I think it will complement. I mean, at the end of the day, with CBDC, it is nothing else than fiat currency. It's just in digital form, right? And it actually provides a lot of advantages to central banks or governments in general, because if you just think about the hard cash, you have to manage that cash, you have to print, etc., distribute, the cost is enormous for that, and I think one of the reasons why a lot of central banks looking at that is also the way how you can actually save massively costs in that space, and I think India is now very active with papers in that space as well, and also I think it will also impact the way how banks operate these days, It's always interesting to see that banks like JP Morgan, moving also in the blockchain space, and trying actually to build up their own solutions, and also in the cryptocurrency space, etc. So there's a lot of things happening. But yeah, I mean, I think it will just be positive in the long run, CBDC, also for the cryptocurrency itself, in general. That's my take on that.
Thank you, Dom. The last couple of questions. What does Lykke Business do? I've read a little bit about Lykke Business. It's been there for a while, and is this a spin-off that you are working on right now, or either what do you do in with Lykke Business, the fintech part of the business? And what are the plans? Again, I don't want to talk about too much of your future plans, like confidential information, but anything that we can share for the listeners and for everyone to benefit.
Yeah, I mean, again, when you look at the ecosystem, there are different kind of part of Lykke. So you have a B2C area since I think 2015, so one of the earlier pioneers in the industry. So they built up a crypto exchange in UK, but didn't really scale it up like other players, for whatever reasons in general, but it's still there, and operative, etc. You have a custody segment with innovative custody solutions. And then you have the company where I'm looking after is the B2B segment, where we actually develop blockchain-based enterprise solutions, right? Could be big banks or for big conglomerates, for startups, etc. And it's quite interesting. They were one of the early pioneers, so they are around since 5-6 years now. But very boutique, and it feels like a startup, because when you look at blockchain as a technology, right, most of the projects and most of the POCs you've done over the last couple of years, they didn't go live into the market, right? Because it was more experimental, So they build up a lot of assets, a lot of solutions around, for example, digital asset trading, around custody, around token rewards, for example, or token ecosystems, etc. So full-blown solutions are there, and now it's just to go to the next stage. It's like a startup now, because now we are seeing that those solutions are going with certain use cases into the market live, right? And now it's just to scale it in the long run and in general. That's what we will do now in general. But it's interesting. It's an established company, but I would still classify them as a startup, right? With a lot of potential in general. And and we are focused purely on the B2B side, so we have clients like some of the biggest banks in the market, or big conglomerates, and the diversity is quite interesting as well, because if you look at the type of clients, it's from small to big, different industries, but also the use cases, if you want to, for example, bring products to us and launch them with us, and we are the technology partner, that's what we are doing. Could be NFT marketplace, or it could be any kind of tokenization platform or loyalty reward platform, etc. It's quite interesting in general. And also the leverage between the different members of the ecosystem is quite interesting and full of a lot of potential, where we actually can really leverage the strengths from each member of the ecosystem in general.
You touched upon NFTs, the non-fungible tokens. Where is that going?
I mean, everybody speaks about it, right? The thing is, NFTs are not only in relation, for example, to art, where it really hit it off, right? At least in the mainstream media, etc. But we see a lot of use cases also in terms of, IP or ownership, for example, and you see also more competition from technology perspective coming in with big companies trying to establish marketplaces there. So what we are trying to do, we are not trying to actually set up our own NFT platform, right? And compete against a multi-billion company like OpenSeas, right? So what we are trying to do is to invite clients to bring their products to us, and we as a technology partner, we're helping them to realize that product, to launch the product in the market. And it could be then NFTs as well, or any kind of tokenization of any kind of asset in general. Yeah. So our founder also believes that in the long run, any asset in the world will be tokenized, and you see that trend now. The discussions we have now with clients and potential clients is quite really interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, everything you can tokenize these days, digitize, etc.
There are thousands of currencies. There are thousands of new currencies probably coming up every so often. Where do these come from? What are geographically? What are the areas that you see a lot of new cryptocurrencies being introduced into the market? And where do they find funding for their kind of projects? Is it regular VC market, or do they go up, put their own money, or just their expertise? How do they, where are they coming from, and how do they find money for those projects?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why these new tokens or currencies are coming actually to the market is to raise money at the end of the day, right? And I think that's also always, quality evaluation from my perspective. If, for example, if I name them issuer of that currency, right, is also putting their own money into that project, or is just relying on external money. But in general, I mean, back to your question, I think there are so many VCs now, so many, institutional investors getting active in that space. There's so much money to spend, and I think sure, you have to have the right business plan and the right vision for that, but there's so much money at the moment, with the right project which you can raise them from institutional investors, but there are also, unfortunately, coins etc., which are going to the market, which are not performing very well, right, and where the project is very questionable, and so I would also always go, where some reputable names are maybe behind in general. But I think it's getting more and more and more, because there are so many new innovations coming, right? And that opens up a lot of fund requirements, actually, from that point of view. Yeah.
Dom, thank you very much. You have shared a lot of wealth of knowledge on fintech, blockchain, crypto things. We are still learning as well. Everyone is learning. This information will be very, very helpful to anyone who's exploring into this area, or even thinking of investing, or trying it out as well a little bit. Thank you very much for your time, taking the time out of your busy schedule. Dom, joining us from Singapore, thank you very much for joining and sharing a wealth of knowledge with us. We'll hope to connect again soon, and I wish you all the best wherever you do in this year.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Dom. It was such a pleasure to hear your experience, your background, and also your insights on giving a little bit of feedback and suggestions, even for the audience, of how they can do things. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, and speak soon.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Sixcast. We'd love to connect with you, so feel free to comment or reshare. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Six Senses. Bye for now.